All right, so our final rule of attraction is reciprocity. That just means that if someone does nice things for you, we tend to like them more, and then we tend to do nice things back. Right? So if someone shows they're interested in us, we're kind of like, oh, they must be a good person if they like me because I'm awesome. And so that, makes you like them more. Right? So the more there's kind of a give and take back and forth, the more you start to like somebody, right? The more you kind of spend time with them, the more you start to like them as well. So reciprocity also plays a role in having attraction to other people. But proximity and similarity are still like by far the most important things in what's attractive, how we become attractive to someone, and if we decide to kind of stay with that person for the long haul. All right, so when we study love, and again, love is an interesting construct because it's hard to operationally have an operational definition for it, but when we look at what we consider to be love, researchers tend to say there's three kind of main parts to it. Right? There's an intimacy part of it, which is feelings of emotional closeness, being able to open up to a person, share your thoughts, share your feelings, break down your walls, show them who you really are, be vulnerable with someone. Right? That's having intimacy, and you can have that with a friendship as well as with a love relationship. Another component is passion, right? Emotional and sexual arousal, right? Being excited by that person, wanting to be with that person, wanting to, just be like, I love you so much, passion. Oh, wrong way, sorry. Too far. Then the next component is commitment. So I'm going to be here, I know things aren't always going to be great, but we're going to be committed. We're going to make decisions about this relationship together, and we're going to move forward together and be committed within, this relationship with each other. So in order to have what we consider to be like consummate love, or love that lasts over time, you need to have all three. You need to have the passion, even though that's going to fade over time because of dopamine withdrawal. But you want to see intimacy and commitment increase over time. So in lasting relationships, we see there's still passion, not as high as in the first few months, but still there. And then intimacy needs to be increasing and commitment needs to be increasing, right? So as those two things increase across time, passion stays at a lower level, but is still there, then we see a love that's kind of like a lasting love that's going to last for a long time. You can have different types of love based on the different components, right? You can just have intimacy, you could just have passion, you could just have commitment, you could have passion and intimacy and no commitment, intimacy, no passion, right? So there's different types of love that kind of are made out of the combinations, but to have a lasting love, you need to have all three. Now, this just wants to jump to this one. So moving on to social roles. All right, so social roles are a pattern of behavior expected of a person in a particular social position. What's that mean? It just means that as a society, we expect people in certain roles to act certain ways, right? So, we say things like, they're not acting very presidential, or they're not acting like a, upstanding member of society, or whatever, right? Teachers are supposed to act in a specific way. Firefighters are supposed to act in a specific way. Police officers, even adults compared to children, right? So we have like these social roles that we play that say, you're in this position, this is how you're supposed to act, right? So, I'd be really upset if my kid's first grade teacher, came to class, super drunk, right? That is not a behavior that's expected of someone who's a first grade teacher. So our social roles kind of tell us that this is, they dictate to us how we're supposed to behave. So this was really studied most notably in the Stanford prison experiment, where Phillips and Bardo ran an experiment in the basement of the psychology department at Stanford, looking to see kind of what would happen if he assigned half the people in the study to be prison guards and half of them to be prisoners. So read about the study in your book. It's very famous. It has some problematic things about it, and lately it's come about that it's not as that there were things that he may have lied about in the study, so I'm not going to really go into it. It is interesting to read, so make sure you read it in your book. But what we do know about what kind of came out of how social roles affect us, and what we can kind of pull from this, and what we've kind of been looking at lately, is how when we act in a certain way, it can change who we are, like kind of fundamentally, right? So if you've ever heard the term fake it till you make it, right? Like pretend to be happy until you're happy, right? Pretend to like this person until you do like this person. We find that that actually is true. So like in this Stanford prison experiment, right, they were pretending to be prison guards, pretending to be like these mean people, and then they ended up becoming kind of these really hateful, mean people and having really bad emotional feelings towards the people that were playing the prisoners, right? So if we pretend for too long, the pretending becomes real, right? So those social roles that we play can become who we are as a person. So you can't really pretend for that long before the pretending isn't pretending anymore. So if you've ever seen the movie Mean Girls, which you haven't, what's wrong with you? Go watch Mean Girls. Right? So, Lindsay Lohan wasn't a mean girl at first, pretended to be a mean girl to like infiltrate them, and then guess what? Spoiler alert, she becomes a mean girl. Right? Because once we start acting in a particular way, it's really hard to change ourselves back because of that kind of cognitive dissonance, right? Your behaviors aren't matching your thoughts, and so your thoughts start to match your behaviors. Right? So we kind of changes who we are, and it can, for better or for worse, right? If you start acting like a better person, even if you don't, think that you're a good person, you'll start to be a better person. So that's good. Fake it till you make it. All right, so let's talk about altruism and the bystander effect. So altruism is, pro-social behavior. It's doing something because it's good to do that thing, right? You see someone who needs help, you stop and you help them. We want to, as psychologists especially, try and increase altruistic behavior, increase pro-social behavior, right? Make sure that if someone sees someone in need, they actually do help them. But there are some things that can prevent this from happening. One thing is what we call the bystander effect. So the bystander effect is that when there is a large group of people present and they see someone in need, the larger the group, the less likely the person is to get help. Right? So if you fall down, in the middle of the quad and there's 100 people walking around, you are much less likely to have someone stop to help you than if there's only 2 people in the quad. All right, so why is that? Why is the more people mean less likely to get help? It's because of what we call diffusion of responsibility. Everyone else thinks that someone else will do something, right? People are like, oh, someone should help that person. Oh yeah, someone should probably help that person. Well, someone will help them. Someone will stop. Someone will call 911. Someone will do it. And we diffuse the responsibility off of ourselves so that, we don't have to be the one to do action, right? So that diffusion of responsibility leads to the bystander effect, which is that we tend to just kind of stand around and look and actually not do anything to help. So this was first kind of studied with the case of Kitty Genovese, who was a nurse in New York City, I think Queens, and she was walking home one night to get to her apartment, and a man came up behind her and stabbed her repeatedly in the street in front of her apartment building. And she screamed, and a bunch of people opened their windows and looked out, and I think one guy said like, hey, and the guy ran off. And so she is, there, like bleeding, having been stabbed, and no one came down to help her. And she somehow made it to the front door of her apartment complex, got it open, but since no one came and helped her and the police didn't show up, the guy that had stabbed her came back, stabbed her again multiple times, and murdered her. And people even had like opened their doors and looked down, and, no one came to help. And no one called the police. And, and they were kind of like, when they came, later and investigated, it was like, why didn't you do anything? And they said, well, I thought someone else would do it, right? Obviously someone else would help this person, but nobody did. And if someone had stepped in at the beginning of it, she would have lived. But they didn't, and she died, right? Because of that diffusion of responsibility, thinking someone else is going to do it. So when we are, wanting to not be, that bystander effect, we want to notice what's happening around us, right? We tend to live in our little bubbles with our AirPods in and just like doop-a-doop-a-doo, but maybe, look around and see if there's someone who possibly could use help. Define if there is an emergency happening. Take responsibility. Say, I will be the one to help. Plan a course of action, and then take action. It's really not that hard, right? Just think that no one else is going to help but you, right? Just have that in your mind. If I don't help, no one will. Just think that way, right? It may not be true, but just pretend like it is, all right? And always help. Always call 911. Always do what you can. Don't put your own self into, peril. Don't like jump in front of the knife. But if you can do something to help, then you absolutely should, because thinking someone else will do it is false, because everyone thinks someone else will do it, right? If you are helping someone, let's say that you see a car accident and someone's bleeding, you should go up there, help the person, and then point to a specific person that's standing around and say, you person, you call 911. Like, force them, say, this is your job to do. You go and stop the traffic. You do this, right? If you point at someone and give them a specific thing to do, they'll do it. Right? But if you just say, someone call 911, everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess someone's going to call 911. And then people don't. All right? So, again, like if you see something, call 911. What is the absolute worst thing that can happen? The 911 person will say, it's already been reported. The end. Right? Or you could help someone, right? You could get emergency help to them. So don't not help. As long as you can safely help and not put yourself in danger, you absolutely should, because you may be the only person who will stop for help. And it can be scary. I get that. It's not always the easiest thing to help people. I was driving home on the tollway really late one night from the airport, and there were these people driving like crazy people, and I was like, oh, they're going to get in an accident. And guess what? One of them spun out. They hit the side of an underpass, and so hard that they propelled back into the middle of the tollway. All of the airbags deployed in pouring rain at like 11 o'clock at night, and they are, backwards, all flat tires, all airbags deployed in the middle of the tollway with people going 80 miles an hour everywhere. And I saw this all happen, and my first thing was, go around them, go home. And then I had to tell my brain, nope, because no one else is going to help these people, and there's a very good chance they're going to get hit again because people aren't going to see them because of this rain. And so in my little Kia minivan, I stopped right behind them, and I turned on my flashers, and I got out on the tollway and walked up to their car and checked on them to see if they were alive, and thankfully they all were. And I told them, okay, I need you to, if you're okay and no one's hurt, then why don't you come get in my car, and I'm going to call the police. And so I did, and they sat in my minivan, and I gave them goldfish crackers and juice boxes, and we waited for the, cavalry to arrive. But if I hadn't done that, no one probably would have done that, and those people could have very possibly died. Was that an easy decision for me? No, because I have 2 little kids at home, something could have happened to me too. But I had to kind of override that in my brain and say, it's important for me to save these people, right? And so you kind of have to do that. You kind of have to take that leap, even though it's really uncomfortable sometimes, and say, I'm going to help. I'm going to be the one who, maybe saves a life.